My name is Thomas Olsen, and I'm the founder of SecureAI.se. And today we're here with Rachel Miller, which has built the AI search functionality for Reddit. And if I'm not mistaken, this must be one of the biggest search implementations ever, or AI implementations ever. Let's start with telling me a bit about yourself and how did you end up in this space of all spaces?
Yeah, so I've been at Reddit for almost 5 years now. So I've been here a while. And it all actually started back in college when I became a computer science major. I knew I wanted to go into tech in some way, shape, or form. And so I applied to a ton of internships, et cetera, ended up landing on Reddit. And I've actually been on the search team since then. I've been working on the search product and more recently building out some AI products as well, integrating the two and mostly focusing now on the experiences side.
Can you talk us through the product that you launched from Reddit, from inception of the idea to actually finished product? As we know, Reddit is one of the biggest sites on the internet. So you just don't go about and change it very quickly. I assume there is a lot of stuff going on in the background before you can actually make these changes.
One of my first projects was rebuild the entire search surface, and then all the way up to most recently has been using and leveraging AI a little bit more. So one of the products that we most recently launched was the ability to have AI summary within your searches. What we want to do is give you a new way to search. We understand that the landscape is changing and people are not just relying on your traditional search engine. So essentially what this is doing is solving the problem of find information on Reddit, which a lot of people want to do. And maybe I don't want to necessarily go through every single result and click through, read the comments, go back, etc. So we're making it even easier for you. And essentially what we thought is, okay, we know that people come to Reddit for real human discussion. Let's not take that away from people. And we know that people can get big summarized LLM generated things from a lot of different sources. So what I think makes this product separate is that essentially it's pulling out the direct quotes and just putting them in front of you in a very obvious way, so that you can do the checking yourself if you want to. There is some short bits of summarization, but every single summarized point will have quotes next to it. And one click will take you directly to the person that said the thing. So you don't have to worry about, oh, is this summarized or is it real or what's the source, etc. So I think generally the product process has been starting with the problem of people want to find information on the internet, especially Reddit, because there's, 20 years of content at this point,
Mm.
and content, and just making it easier for people to access it.
I was most blown away with how did you get this to scale? Because I mean, I use Reddit daily, and as most people do, and the amount of content that's there regarding some old cafe racer modes. How do you get this to scale in real time? That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, shout out to our infrastructure engineers mostly. I think there are a lot of components. Obviously, one thing is understanding and anticipating that there are going to be a lot of users, a lot of traffic. So usually with rollouts, we'll be very mindful of, okay, how many users do we expect to be using this? How many, queries per second, et cetera. And trying to estimate that as good as we can beforehand. And then based off of that information, we'll look at essentially a ramp plan. So if it's something that we know that tons and tons of people are going to go to, we'll start out very slow, 1%, wait a few hours, 2%, et cetera. And then the engineers will mostly be keeping an eye on logs, making sure nothing is broken. On the product side, there are quite a few subreddits that are like help subreddits where people can drop feedback. So we'll keep an eye on that to see, okay, is someone complaining about something being broken? Usually there is, but that's okay. That's the internet. But I think there's two ways, engineers and then also keeping an eye on user feedback.
What was the biggest challenges they found that were LLM related or AI related to implementing this regarding the tech integration of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can speak from a product perspective at least. I think there's two things. Number one is prioritizing user problems because Reddit is, used by millions and millions of people every day. So everyone's going to want something different. So figuring out, okay, what is the thing we're going to focus on first? And then, applying AI ML in that way. And then once we actually have the product, I think one of the biggest things is user trust. So making sure if at as much as possible, reducing hallucinations, ensuring that the content that we're serving is, safe, etc. Because ultimately people do trust Reddit, and we want to make sure that trust is maintained. And so we're just making sure we're keeping a really good eye on any kind of hallucinations or bias that comes up.
Yeah, you mentioning bias and hallucinations, and I guess also unsafe content. So how do you identify that in the responses, and how do you handle those risks coming back?
Yeah, this is something that I try to encourage all product managers to do a little bit more, especially when they're developing AI products, is thinking about the risks way before you start implementing the solution. So I think a lot of times once people start thinking about the issues that come up, they've already built the model. But I think you should start thinking about risks essentially when you're identifying the user problems, and even throughout the prioritization stage of like figuring out the problem you want to solve. Because I think if you start there and understand the risks of addressing a certain user population or a certain problem, that will help you think through the process of how you should actually go about building something. There are quite a few questions that I encourage people to think about throughout the process. So one of the ones is definitely thinking about how are you going to get data? Where is the data coming from? Is there a way that you can reduce the amount of bias that's in the data? Is it fresh data? Because if you're serving stale things, that's not very helpful. It's not going to give you a very good output. And then once you start to think about solutions and the model you're going to pick and how you're going to fine tune it or prompt tune it, thinking about the different risks. So I like to try to list out all of the risks. A question that I ask is what happens if the model goes right, or what happens if the model goes wrong? And to the best of your ability, writing out mitigations. Of course, you're not going to catch there's something that I'm particularly worried about. I'll run it by them and just say, okay, does this make sense? Do you have any other concerns that might come up?
Okay, so from my experience in the cybersecurity industry, this sounds like you did a very early threat model with like an attack tree of what could go wrong and right, and sort of methodology did you do for the threat analysis?
Yeah, I think this is something that I'm still trying to figure out what would work at scale because, of course, I can do what I want to do with my own products and team, but I can't necessarily mandate that the rest of the company do it. So I've played around with a few different things and collaborated again with the policy team. We've thrown out ideas about like model cards. I think there were some issues with that being a little bit too heavy handed because you want to balance making sure that you're getting features out quickly and then also considering the risks. So I think the model cards were a good place to at least get our thoughts on paper. But then I think the next thing we're exploring is how can we still get people to ask those essential questions without making them add a whole new process. So I think right now this might look at just socializing the ideas a little bit more to start. And then seeing where that goes. And then the other thing that we're looking a little bit into, but we aren't sure about, is figuring out if there's other kinds of metrics that we could actually integrate into existing experimentation. So that's not implemented yet, but I think that would be an easy sort of like automated way for people to start checking, and it's relatively low lift as well.
What do you think is the most common misconception people have in your mind when it comes to AI and these AI powered solutions that we're building today?
The first thing is sometimes I feel like people are building AI products just for the sake of building it, and that's what the popular thing to do is. So I really encourage people to, when they're going through the product ideation process, make sure that you're actually solving the user problem and that you really do need to be using AI. So just encouraging people to really think through, okay, is AI really the best way to solve this problem? And then I think the other thing that we just need to be mindful as we incorporate it is understanding how much we're trusting the system. There are limitations to these models, hallucinations, bias, et cetera, et cetera. So how much are we going to have a human in the loop, considering that before you implement it, considering do you need to train people how to use the model or how to interpret the output, et cetera. So I think those two things, making sure you know if you actually need to use AI, and then if you are implementing it, make sure you understand like how much freedom or power that you're going to give it to.
In the end, what kind of guardrails did you implement? Did you implement human in the loop, or how did you actually solve this problem in the implementation phase that you identified during the threat phase?
Yeah, I think that I did, to the best of my ability, go through the process that I mentioned, and just made sure to raise it with policy and safety people early on. I think when issues came up, a lot of it was through very thorough playtesting. If you're able to come up with that list of risks and mitigations, turn that into something actionable that you can use in a playtest and get a lot of people to test it, because everyone's going to come up with their own cases and their own ideas about how they'd use the product. So one thing that we like to do is for certain products, we will open it up to all employees at the company. So then everyone is testing it, and then we've got a channel where people can drop feedback. So I think those have been mostly the most helpful things.
There's a lot of talk about agentic AI now as well, and we're somewhere very high on the hype cycle. So how do you see that panning out actually?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's going to continue accelerating, especially as it becomes easier and easier to build these kinds of models. I think more and more people are going to play with it. In terms of agentic AI specifically, again, I guess it depends on how easy it becomes to implement something like this. But I think it's something we need to be very cautious about. Again, going back to the point of, okay, we can develop these things, but what safeguards are we going to have around it? Like, how much power are we going to give it? I think is very important.